Today, we're going to talk about the thing that everybody wants to talk about, money. I have an expert. What do you think the biggest misconception that Christians have about money is?
Most people look at money as something secular, as something evil, as something bad, as something worldly. We don't look at money as something spiritual.
Wow.
There are over 2,000 verses in the Bible that deal with how to handle money and possessions. There is more in the Bible about how to handle money and possessions than it is about. Most pastors don't talk about money very well. Not to mention that many pastors abuse money sometimes.
We're going to go there. Do you think money changes people?
I think
This is The Deep End with Lecrae.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to talk about the thing that everybody wants to talk about, money. But I'm not just going to sit up here and talk about money. I have an expert, okay? You can't just get up here talking about money. I have an expert. Not only is he an expert, he's a lot of things. So let's go down the list of all the things that he is. First of all, he was a highly recruited football player that was a star at the University of Tennessee, went on to play in the NFL, made his money in the NFL, and decided to go into the financial wealth management business. Worked for Morgan Stanley, one of the biggest financial wealth brokerage management firms in the world, and then became a pastor. Not only is he a pastor, he's my pastor, y'all. Today we had the pleasure of meeting with Lee Jenkins.
Man, what an introduction, man.
Hey, man, you did a lot of
Thank
things.
you. Yeah, I just haven't determined what I wanted to do when I grow up, yet. I'm still trying to figure out who I am. So,
Man.
just done a lot of things, man.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you.
Well, it's an honor to be your friend, to be your pastor, honor to be on this podcast, man. You've had a lot of heavyweights on here.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's been
Kurt Franklin, who's who, Jackie Hill Perry, who's who, Darius Daniels, who's who. Now you got me, who's he?
First of all, what's crazy is that you have so many backstories with all of these people. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. I think, when we first met, I was going through a weird time, kind of a tough time, and you were just very gracious and very shepherding and welcoming, invited me to be around and just was very caring and kind. And it's everything you want in a pastor, honestly.
Thank you.
But I had no idea the backstory.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you come across so humble and down to earth and approachable and attainable. But then I'm like, wait, you were in the NFL? Wait, you were the star at University of Tennessee? Wait, you were managing some of the biggest accounts in the country financially.
Yeah.
And how does that happen? How do you get from there to here?
Man, well, it's been an amazing journey. I've always been interested in a lot of different things. Even when I was a child, I was interested in sports. I was interested in music. I played saxophone.
Wow.
I love going to church.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I had this thing in me, this athletic thing, this business thing, and this creative thing in me all at the same time. I played in the band in high school. I didn't stop playing in the band until I started being a football player, So I had all these varied interests. And so I've just always been curious about different things.
Yeah.
So when I got to college, obviously at the University of Tennessee, man, I felt like I could make it in the NFL because a lot of the guys who were a little bit older than me, they were playing in the NFL, and I practiced against them every day. Yeah. And I said, man, if they can do it, I can do it. So that was always my dream.
Yeah.
And then after my career ended, by the way, NFL for me stood for not for long.
Which is important for people.
And it's not a long time for most people.
Yeah.
So it was a short stint with the New York Giants. And then after that, I jumped from sports to the creative world. I became the road manager and business manager for the #1 gospel group at that time in the world, which was the Winans.
Crazy.
Yeah, that was really crazy, man.
Question is?
Yeah, oh my God. I was right there. Question is, tomorrow.
That's crazy.
Everything you touch is a song.
So you're managing their money at this time?
Managing money and them.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and them as artists.
Yeah.
Traveling with them everywhere they went, every interview, everything. I was right there with them. And this is when they first took off. They won their first Grammy when I was with them.
Wow.
And, of course, their albums were doing great. So that was a phenomenal experience. And I thought about making that my career.
Okay.
I studied business in college. Then I went to football. And next thing you know, I'm in the music industry. And I thought about making that my career, but I just wanted to do something that I thought was a little bit more structured, a little bit broader. And so I eventually moved back to Atlanta, which was my hometown, got hired by Morgan Stanley. They sent me to New York City, right on Wall Street. And I worked in the World Trade Center, literally. And one of those towers is where I went to work every day for months and did my training. And then I came back to Atlanta, which was my hometown, and started my career in the investment business and spent 25 years as an investment advisor managing the portfolios for multi-millionaires, a few billionaires. And basically, I was in sales because you got to sell people, convince people to entrust their assets to you. And that's what I did for 25 years. And then after that, I became a pastor, started a church from scratch. We've gone from 0 people 12 years ago to almost 4,000 members.
Sheesh.
And it's been quite a ride.
Man, God has been breathing on the things that you touched. It's crazy. But you skipped over something that I wanted. You managed the wealth of billionaires.
Yes.
So billionaires entrusted you with their money.
Yes, they did.
If anybody's watching this, billionaires trusted this man with their money.
Yeah.
You need to listen and pay attention to what he's gonna say, because I don't have $1 billion. So, you know what I mean? If I had $1 billion, I wouldn't know who to trust it with. But clearly people trusted you with that level of money. What, like, you obviously, I know a little bit more of your story, but you didn't grow up with money.
No, I didn't.
So for a lot of people who don't grow up with money, I feel like they go one or two ways when they get some. They blow it all.
Yeah.
Or they just hold on to it and don't do anything with it.
Right.
What lessons did you learn, or did you start applying based off of your experience?
Well, it's interesting that I ended up in a career advising and investing money for billionaires and multi-millionaires when I did not come from that kind of background.
Right.
In fact, my background was the opposite. I didn't even know what a stock was, a bond was, until I got in college.
Wow.
And I barely knew it then. So here's what was driving me. I grew up in a home and we struggled immensely from a financial standpoint. My father was an alcoholic, very, very inspirational to me because he was a former college football player. He was at all my games, came to a lot of my practices. He was my biggest fan. Very inspirational, but very irresponsible as a father, especially financially. So we struggled a lot. There were eviction notices. There were things that lights getting cut off, electricity getting cut off. So as a kid, I had this drive to want to be financially successful because I had tasted what semi-poverty looked like, and I didn't like it. Furthermore, I saw the damage it did, to my mother struggling, just overall the stress. So I kind of made up my mind when I was about 8 or 9 years old that whatever being a millionaire is, that's what I want to be. So when I went to college, I studied business, and I wanted to know, how does this economy work? How are these big buildings getting built? How are people able to drive around in Mercedes-Benzes and BMWs and live in mansions? And most of the people who look like me, who were black, and at least this was primarily in the early 1980s, when I was coming out of college, most of the people who looked like me, who made a lot of money, were either entertainers or athletes. Now, there were successful doctors and lawyers and entrepreneurs. They just weren't showcased.
Right.
So we didn't see successful black people showcased in the 80s until the Cosby Show came on television, until the Huxtable family.
That's true.
Yeah, man. Other than that, it was basketball players, football players, singers, dancers, actors.
Yeah.
So I was intrigued by, to be perfectly honest with you, how white people and Jewish people made so much money and black people didn't.
Yeah.
Why didn't we have the kind of wealth? And so that became one of my missions, to learn about this thing called wealth management. And as I learned, I wanted to pass it on to other people. So I just fell in love with it. And then the last thing is, when I went to the NFL, I had some money, and many of my friends had money, and most of us didn't know what to do with it because we weren't trained in financial stewardship. We weren't talking about wealth. Wasn't something that we were trained in our schools, in our churches, or in our families. So now you got money in your hands and you don't know what to do with it. So what do you do with something that you don't understand? You abuse it.
Yeah.
You blow it.
Yeah. So
I did what most 22-year-olds do when they come into quick money, and that is, although I had the academic knowledge, I didn't have the discipline to hold on to it. So money came and went in my life pretty quick as a one-year pro athlete. And I made up my mind, from here out, Lord, if you bless me with another penny, literally, I'm going to steward it well, and I'm going to build this into wealth by the grace of God.
That's very interesting. Like, a couple things you said. Like, number one is being 22 and encountering more money than you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah.
What do you feel like the pitfall for most athletes is? Because I'm not even contemplating the fact that they're super young. So what is the pitfall? What don't they get, or what are they not understanding?
Well, people who don't come from money, obviously, or not obviously, but people who don't come from money sometimes have an inordinate desire to spend money. So, for instance, when I got drafted by the New York Giants and I went to the stadium to practice, I noticed a couple of things about the cars that the guys had on the team. Most of the black players had Porsches, Benzes, BMWs, top of the line. Most of the white guys had pickup trucks or American sedans. Now, why was that?
Yeah.
For some reason, we, and I'm including myself, had this inordinate desire to show off our wealth. We kind of felt like we had something to prove. There was something in us that wanted to be accepted because maybe we felt like we weren't accepted prior to that. And some of that is because of the way we grew up.
Yeah.
I mean, racism and bigotry can do a number on you from a self-esteem standpoint. And poverty can too, and struggling, financial struggle can. So some of these white guys, and I'm generalizing here, many of them came from very solid middle class or affluent backgrounds.
Okay.
So the first thing that they did, they didn't go out and buy a Mercedes-Benz with their bonus check or a big house, or they didn't have to buy mama a house and buy sister and brother cars. But many of us felt like we had to do that.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of pro athletes have so many other obligations, or they feel like they have obligations, or they're trying to satisfy some things that they never had an opportunity to do or to experience. And that causes them to make sometimes dumb financial decisions.
Man, that's really good, because even as I'm thinking about what you're saying, I think even when I began to make some money, I wanted the symbols of wealth
Yes.
more than I wanted the wealth itself. It's like I had I had to make sure people knew I was valuable. And my wife, on the other hand, she came from a more middle class family. Her dad, pulled himself up from his bootstraps and became a fireman and built houses and did stuff. And so she had a more solid background, and she was always like reeling me in, like, no, don't put no rims on that. Right? and you don't have to do all those things. So it makes a lot of sense how insecurities and all those things. And even when I got my first big check, my thought process was, I got to help my mom.
Yes.
That was kind of my thought process. And so I never even considered, some people, that's not even in there.
It's not even on their radar.
Man.
Yeah, but for us, it was more the symbols. We were more driven as young African Americans, athletes. At that time, I was an athlete, but I would say that this is prevalent in a lot of different genres.
Oh, yeah.
We were more interested in the symbols of wealth rather than the substance of wealth. And it's a big difference between the symbols and the substance.
Break that down a little bit. What is?
Well, the substance of wealth is building real wealth, which is building your net worth. Net worth, when you say a millionaire, you mean your assets minus your liabilities. That whatever that number is, you take your assets minus your liability, that means net worth. Okay. So substance of wealth from a financial standpoint is your net worth, building it over time. However, most young athletes, especially many of the Black athletes, we were enamored by income. Income is what you make. You can't pass your income down from generation to generation. That's a wealth issue. So we were enamored by income, how much money we were making, and then transferring that income into status symbols.
Wow.
And neither one of those build wealth. So I had to reorientate myself to, what does wealth mean, financially speaking? And nobody taught me that. When I grew up, wealth was what kind of car you drove, what kind of house you lived in, what kind of clothes you wore, what kind of jewelry you had. That was wealth. But wealth to some of my other colleagues who did not look like me was what kind of house you had, but it wasn't necessarily the biggest house on the street. They would try to buy the smallest house on the street in the most expensive neighborhood, but the smallest house. They were not enamored by luxury, high-end luxury vehicles. They certainly weren't buying expensive clothes and jewelry. Now, they eventually did. But that wasn't the first thing that they did. So the symbols were a byproduct of the substance.
Wow.
But we go for the symbols first. And never experience the substance of wealth.
That was a masterclass.
Yeah.
Okay. That's really interesting that you say that. I remember when I was with this particular brand and I was sponsored by them, and I mean, they gave me everything. They sent like products to my house all the time. I felt like I was just this ambassador that was just getting loved on and getting everything that they had to offer. And I want that for you. I want you to get everything we have to offer. And that means you need to become a part of the B-Side family. Because once you do, it's like we sponsor you now. It's like we want to give you all the bonus content, the courses, all of the things that would make you the better version of yourself. So make sure you subscribe to the B-Side so that you can get access to all this bonus content made just for you. I want to talk about, because you're a pastor.
Yes.
Pastors and money is a big problem, especially like in the Black community.
Yes, it is.
Right? Like there's this like terrible history or relationship of what the Black community thinks about pastors and money. So I do want to get there, but what I want to, from your perspective, like, what do you think the biggest misconception that Christians have about money is? Like, what don't we realize?
Wow. Well, I think that is the first misconception.
Okay.
How about this? God and money, Christians and money, then it comes down to pastors and money.
Okay.
But let's talk about God and money. Most people look at money as something secular, as something evil, as something bad, as something carnal, as something worldly.
Yeah.
We don't look at money as something spiritual, okay?
Yeah.
That's the number one problem. Because money, handling money, stewarding money, tells us more really about our spiritual lives than almost anything. And let me give you an example.
Yeah, break that down.
Jesus said, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. In fact, in Luke chapter 19, he challenged a guy named Zacchaeus. Well, actually, he didn't even have to challenge him. Zacchaeus saw Jesus passing by, and Zacchaeus was the head of the IRS in Jericho, and the text says he was very rich.
Yeah.
Because they ripped a lot of people off.
Scammer.
That's right. He was a scammer. He made big money.
Yeah.
And when he encountered Jesus, he said, Jesus, half of my possessions I'm going to give to the poor. He said, if I've defrauded anyone of anything, and he had, he says, I'm going to give him 4 times as much back. And Jesus said, today, salvation has come to this house. In other words, Zacchaeus, I know you are a changed man by not what you prayed, by not going to church, but by what you just said you were going to do with your money.
Wow.
Because our money is a barometer of our hearts. One more example, Luke 18:18, the rich young ruler.
Yeah.
He said, Jesus, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus says, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do this. He said, man, I've been in church my whole life. I've done all of these since I was a little kid. Jesus said, you lack one thing. Give your possessions to the poor and come and follow me. And Jesus said, the man went away sad.
Yeah.
And then he says how hard it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. So here's my point. Both of those guys were challenged, not by how much church they went to, not by how the prayers they prayed or how much scripture they knew, but by their money. So money is often used as a barometer of our spiritual life. Every spending decision is a spiritual decision.
Sheesh.
Because what we do with money matters. So people look at money as something, again, carnal, bad, instead of something that God uses in our life to really draw us closer to him. Because we have to make so many decisions about it. So that's the first problem, is we don't look at money the right way as something spiritual. And the biggest thing is we don't look at it as God being the owner of what we have